Have you ever felt as if God were silent, as if He saw everyone but you? As if your prayers went up, but nothing came back? If you've ever struggled with the feeling of being ignored by God, know that you're not alone. Many people reach a point where faith in difficult times begins to get confused, where God's silence seems louder than any answer. But what if this silence doesn't mean absence? What if what you're interpreting as distance is actually something deeper, something intentional? You are not being ignored. God is preparing you for this. And this isn't just a comforting phrase, it's a truth rooted in how Jesus Himself responded to people. And this is where things start to get powerful. In a moment recorded in Mark 6 verse 34, there's a detail that most people simply ignore. Before Jesus spoke, before He taught, before He did anything, He looked. And it wasn't just any look. The Bible says that Jesus saw the crowd with compassion, recognizing that they were like sheep without a shepherd. Why does this matter? Because it reveals something profound about the spiritual meaning of God's silence. It shows that God sees your pain, even when He hasn't yet spoken. It shows that Jesus' teaching always begins with understanding, not just instruction. It may seem like nothing is happening, that God isn't responding, but what if He is doing something you can't yet see? Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover may completely change how you interpret God's silence. And perhaps, at this very moment, God is doing with you the same thing that Jesus did with that multitude, looking before speaking, feeling before acting, preparing before revealing. Because when Jesus saw those people as sheep without a shepherd, He not only recognized their pain, He connected with it. And that completely changes how we understand silence. It's not indifference, it's depth. It's not distance, it's a process that begins in the invisible. Now let me ask you something very sincere. Have you ever been through a moment like this? A time when it seemed like God was silent, but deep down something inside you said that something was happening? If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below about what has touched you the most so far. Sharing your experience can help other people who are going through exactly the same thing, but still can't put it into words. If this message is opening your eyes in any way, please like the video, because that helps the content reach more people who also need to understand what God is doing behind the silence. And if you want to continue receiving messages like this, which reveal the gestures, silences, and attitudes of Jesus in a deeper way, subscribe to the Jesus Beyond Words channel. Your participation here is not just a number, it's what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this kind of transformative content. Because in the end, it's not just about watching, it's about being part of something bigger. And what comes next can show you exactly why this moment you're living through is no coincidence. If we look closely at this moment in Mark 6 verse 34, we begin to realize that it's not just a beautiful scene or an emotional detail. There's a hidden truth there, something that reveals the inner workings of how God sees people. Jesus is facing a crowd that is not only physically tired, but mentally confused, spiritually disoriented, and emotionally exhausted. People who have tried different paths, made decisions, followed leaders, and still felt lost. When the text says that He saw them as sheep without a shepherd, this carries a much deeper impact than it seems. This expression already appeared in the ancient scriptures as a portrait of a people without direction, without true care, without someone who really cared about their journey. It wasn't just about a lack of leadership, it was about emotional abandonment, about living without a clear purpose, about walking without understanding the why of things. And perhaps that's exactly how many people feel today, even those who believe in God. A feeling of walking, but without clarity, trying to maintain faith, but without answers, searching for meaning in the midst of silence. And this is where something comes in that can completely change your mindset about what you are experiencing now. Because before any teaching, before any miracle, before any direction, Jesus perceived the inner state of those people. This shows that God's starting point is not your behavior, but your heart. It's not your words, it's your pain. It's not what you show, it's what's hidden. There's a preparation happening at this deeper level, where decisions are being shaped, where transformation begins from the inside out, even if externally everything seems stagnant. And when you start to see things from this angle, silence ceases to be empty, and becomes a space for construction. Comment below, this makes sense to me. The detail that truly changes everything: Jesus didn't begin by teaching. He didn't open His mouth immediately. He didn't offer a ready-made answer. He didn't deliver a quick solution. He began by observing. And this seems simple, but it carries one of the most profound revelations about how God works behind the scenes of our journey. Jesus' gaze is not superficial, not distracted, not automatic. It is a discerning gaze, one that reads what no one else can see, that understands the pain behind the silence, the confusion behind the decisions, the weariness behind the appearance. While many saw only a crowd, Jesus saw stories, wounds, doubts, inner searches. He saw the invisible. And this is where a powerful mindset shift comes in. Perhaps God hasn't spoken to you in the way you expected yet, not because He doesn't care, but because He's still watching. He's still immersed in the details of your life, understanding every layer of your pain, preparing something that isn't superficial, but truly transformative. There's a huge difference between receiving a quick answer and going through a process that generates real impact. Often, we want immediate instruction, clear direction, a visible way out. But God starts at the root. He begins where decisions are formed, where transformation happens from the inside out. This compassionate gaze is not passive, it is active, intentional, full of purpose. It's as if, before any word, God is aligning everything from within so that, when the answer comes, it truly makes sense. And perhaps what you are experiencing now is exactly that moment. A space where nothing seems to be happening on the outside, but where everything is being prepared on the inside, where there is more happening behind the scenes than you can perceive. And when you understand this, you begin to see silence in a different way, not as absence, but as an essential part of your journey of transformation. Write this down: I'm on this journey too. Here's a revelation that many people have never stopped to consider. Truth without compassion doesn't transform. It may impress, it may seem correct, it may even provide information, but it doesn't generate real change. And that's exactly why Jesus' teaching begins from a different place. He doesn't start from knowledge, he starts from compassion. This completely changes how we understand God's actions. Because, in practice, what we see most today are people seeking quick answers, immediate solutions, clear directions for their decisions. There's an urgency to understand what to do, but little attention to who I am becoming. And that's where this hidden truth comes in. God isn't just interested in giving you an answer. He's committed to your transformation. Information fills the mind, but only compassion reaches the heart. And when the heart is reached, everything changes, the mindset changes, the choices change, the way of seeing life changes. The impact ceases to be superficial and becomes profound, lasting. That's why, often, God doesn't answer in the time we expect. Not because He didn't hear, but because He is working on a level we don't yet perceive. You might even think, God is ignoring me. But in reality, He is preparing you through what you are feeling right now. There is a process happening behind the scenes, where every emotion, every doubt, every silence is being used to align something greater within you. And this requires time, it requires depth, it requires intention. When you start to see things from this perspective, everything takes on a new meaning. Pain ceases to be just pain, and becomes part of the process. Silence ceases to be emptiness, and begins to carry purpose. And perhaps what you need most today is not more answers, but a heart prepared to receive them in the right way. Comment below: this makes sense to me. You need to move from the realm of ideas to your real life, your day-to-day, the decisions you've been making and the feelings you've been silently carrying. What does this mean in practice? It means that the moment when it seems like God isn't answering, it's not rejection, it's a process. It's not abandonment, it's building. Something is being prepared behind the scenes of your journey that goes far beyond an immediate answer. We've been conditioned to seek quick answers, visible solutions, clear paths. But God works on a different logic. He sees what no one else sees, understands what you can't yet explain, and acts on a deeper level than simply solving a specific problem. God sees your pain before He speaks into your life, and that changes everything. Because it shows that silence isn't a lack of attention, it's an excess of intention. Think about it. How many times have you wanted an urgent answer, but looking back now realize you weren't ready to deal with it? How many decisions could have been different if your inner self had been more aligned? It is precisely at this point that the wisdom of God's timing comes in. He is not only interested in the outcome, He is shaping the process so that the impact is complete, so that the transformation is genuine. When you start adjusting your mindset to this, something changes within you. Anxiety begins to lose its power, comparison ceases to make sense, and that feeling of being ignored begins to give way to a more mature perception of reality. You understand that there is care happening, even if invisible, and that every detail is part of a larger preparation. And perhaps the greatest challenge here is not waiting, but trusting while nothing seems to be happening, because it is in this space that faith ceases to be theory and begins to be truly lived. And the more you realize this, the more you begin to see signs that God was never distant, only working in a way that you are still learning to recognize. Write this down: I choose to trust. When you put all of this together, you begin to see a clear pattern in the way God moves. Jesus saw before He taught, He felt before He spoke, He connected before He corrected. And this reveals something essential: you have never been invisible to God, not even for a second. Even in moments when everything seems quiet, there is movement happening behind the scenes of your life. We tend to measure God's presence by what is visible, by what is immediate, by what we can understand. But God is not limited to that. He works on deeper levels, where transformation truly begins. And while you are trying to interpret silence as absence, God is using that same silence as a tool for preparation, aligning thoughts, adjusting your mindset, repositioning your decisions for something greater. There is a type of impact that only happens when the process is respected. When you don't skip steps, when you don't force answers, when you allow the journey to do the inner work it needs to do. And that's exactly what Jesus demonstrated at that moment. Before any word, there was intention. Before any direction, there was connection. Before any teaching, there was compassion. And perhaps what you most need to understand today is that this pattern remains the same. God still acts this way. He still looks before speaking, still feels before responding, still prepares before revealing. And this completely changes how you perceive time, pauses, moments of uncertainty. Because what seems like stagnation can, in fact, be one of the most decisive periods of your journey. The truth is, the silence you're experiencing right now might be exactly where God is building your transformation. And the more you realize this, the more you begin to trust in what you can't yet see. Write this down: I am not alone. And if you've made it this far, it's because, somehow, this message resonated with you. Perhaps it wasn't just a coincidence. Perhaps it was exactly what you needed to hear at this point in your journey. If this type of content resonates with you, if it helps you see beyond the obvious and better understand the behind-the-scenes workings of what God is doing, consider subscribing to the Jesus Beyond Words channel. The idea here is precisely to continue bringing these revelations in a simple yet profound way, to walk alongside you in this process. And I really wanted to know that you stayed until the end, so comment below: this message was for me. This creates a real connection between everyone who is experiencing something similar, even if at different times. If this video made you think, brought you clarity, or even gave you a little more peace, please leave a like. It's a simple way to show that this type of message needs to continue reaching more people who are also trying to understand God's silence. And there's a video over here that perfectly complements everything we've just talked about. Click on it and continue watching.